Good morning. Welcome to day 25 of our 30-day challenge. We got 5 more days left. And today is going to be slightly different than the other 24 days. And it's going to be slightly different because we had a Kingdom Builder session last night. And there was a question asked that I want to address. And the question was, how can I serve a God that doesn't care? And this was in response to me expressing a belief that I had about the nature of God. And before we get into this, I want to just put a disclaimer out there or a warning. My goal is not to offend anyone. My goal is to challenge your belief, your thoughts, and to make you ask deeper questions. Why do you believe what you believe? And some of the language that I'm going to use may be offensive, but I want you to also understand that as humans, all we have is our language. And I believe that in the divine, in the spiritual realm, there's a higher form of communication. I've been blessed to have received some of these downloads, and I think all of us do. And what I notice is it's beyond comprehension, it's beyond explanation, and the only thing you can do is to attempt to describe some of the visions, some of the dreams, some of the things that you've seen in human words. And we struggle with this if any of us speak different languages just to translate within our own human language. So imagine translating from a divine, a higher realm to a lower realm, translating a dream, things that you've never seen. And so I say that to say that when we are reading, analyzing, studying scripture, sometimes we're limited. And yes, these books could have been inspired by God. They may have been inspired, but that doesn't always mean that the person transcribing or the person writing them down captured the very essence that was trying to be conveyed. How many times have you had a dream and you just couldn't explain it? And I'm not looking to argue or debate. This is just an expression of my viewpoints. So the question was, how can I serve a God that does not care? And the reason why I think and I believe that God does not care is because when we think about caring about something, we think about some sort of attachment. We think about human care, which is all we have. We can only really talk about our humanity. But human care is usually born from uncertainty, fear, and some sense of limitation. And one of the attributes that I believe that God has is unlimited, infinite love, potential, beauty, just infinity. And so if something is infinite, for all you math geeks, if something is infinite, what's the opposite of infinite? There can be no opposite. In engineering, we tried to prove the opposite of infinity, and it just goes the other way. There is no opposite. So where there is infinity, if there's infinite love, and we say God is love, we have to assume that it's infinite love. Is there an opposite? Which is another reason why I don't believe in some equal and opposite force, such as the devil, that God can't crush. I think that also goes against believing that God is, infinite. So I believe that God's love is deeper than care, because care is reactive. And care also implies that there's no knowledge of the future, which goes against God being omniscient. Care is anxious. There's some level of anxiety sometimes with care. Care can be needy. And in my opinion, I think care can be emotionally unstable. And these are not attributes that I would give to a limitless God, a limitless being, including jealousy, anger. Those are human emotions. So when people say, how can I serve God who doesn't care? I think the problem is that we've made God too human. We've given God these human relatable characteristics. And so when I'm saying care, I think what people hear is concern, emotional concern, emotional investment. They're moved, they're disturbed, they're affected in an outcome. Again, I believe that God is infinite and God does not care in the limited human sense. Because if you have to care like a human, it implies some sense of lack, some sense of uncertainty, that something outside of God has the power to disturb that equilibrium, that peace that is within God. I don't think God is in a heavenly realm nervous or uncertain about the outcome. I don't think God is emotionally unstable or hoping that things work out. I don't think God is reacting to the things, the people, the places, the creation that God made as though the plan is bigger than God. I think God knows all things. And when you know, care is almost irrelevant. Care changes form. And the way that I think about it is, as a parent, imagine if I'm God, for example. And again, not to offend anyone, but if I'm a God and I have unlimited potential, what I'm going to do is express myself through creation. And so I express myself by creating this world. And let's call this world my house. I fill it up with all kinds of things, furniture. I've got this great black backyard. And I look and I say, man, this was a great job. I did it. But then I say, I need somebody. Well, not need. But I say it would be part of my creative expression to have someone to be in this place, to express me, to represent me here while I go do other things, because it's empty. And I make kids. I express myself through kids. And so these kids, I've made this place, this backyard, this place for these kids to play in a way that no matter what they do, they can never get hurt. I know the boundaries. I know the worst case scenarios. I've already done the calculations. The worst case scenario is death. And for me, I know that I can just bring them back or they'll be back with me. I created them. And so I give them an order, a mandate. Hey, go play. You can run, you can cry, you can scrape your knee, you can choose one toy over the other. I don't care because I'm not affected by it. I know that this is for your pleasure. And the minute something happens, they may be panicking. I'm not panicking because I know. Let's not say death. Let's say it's a bouncy house. And the worst that can happen is a broken knee. But I'm not panicking because I already understand the environment. I created it. And the child might think, oh, you don't care because you're not reacting like me. I just broke my knee. I just sprained my knee. But I already know it's just a sprained knee. You'll go to the doctor and you'll be fine. So it's not that I'm indifferent, but I'm secure. And I think that's a higher form of love, security. There's no insecurity for a God that knows all things. And as that parent, I don't need to control every movement that the child is making because I've already provided the space for them. I've given them the boundaries. I've given them the provision, the correction, and the solution. And so when I say God does not care, I don't mean that God is cold. I just mean that given the reality of who God is and the infinite capacity to know, is there room for God to care? Is anything within God emotionally dependent on our choices? Is there any expression of God's love that comes from insecurity? Or does God's love come from fullness? And keep in mind, I don't believe that God needs us to become anything for God to be complete. God is already complete. And God does not need worship because God is complete. Or does God need obedience from us? As if God is insecure and requires our obedience or service. I believe that God expresses God's infinite love, abundance, joy, all those things through us. And it's not a requirement, it's an invitation. There is no space for need in the infinite. Imagine an ocean that has no end. It will express itself through rivers, through lakes, through other things. It's not desperate to become a wave, but the wave is just one of the ways that the ocean expresses itself. And if there's a well full of water, the well is not thirsty, but the water can still flow. God is not empty, trying to get us to fill up God. God is full. It's the opposite. God is full and is expressing through us. And Jesus said, whatever you do to the least, you do to God. When you see people, you see God. When every time you pray for something, who shows up? It's a human. God is expressing through that human. And so the question is not necessarily, for me at least, it's not, does God care about me the way I want to be cared for? But I think the deeper question is, am I willing to trust in God, in the love of God, in a way that is beyond my comprehension? Am I willing to trust that God truly knows all, is all, and there's a plan that I may not be privy to? Am I willing to trust a love, an infinite love that is not anxious, that does not need anything, that does not require anything? Is that the highest form of love? And a lot of us, we only recognize love when it looks like neediness, panic. We think somebody cares for us because they worry, because they call to check in, because they're constantly, hey, are you okay? We think someone loves us because they chase us around or because they do things. And we think someone is present because they go through some type of, is it empathy? When they're emotionally disturbed by our pain. But I beg to differ with respect to divine love. I don't think it's the same as what we experience on earth. And we get a glimpse of that in motherhood. I think that God's love is not proven by God being a certain way. I don't think that God's love is proven by God being unchanging. And I don't think that God is moved by fear or doubt. And I don't think that God is surprised by our pain, because God sees those moments. But just like me looking at the child, and I can see in their mind they're going through pain, but I know the worst that can happen is we get the healing. And again, we will not be able to relate to this as humans. But I think it's possible for God to allow things to happen and be in silence. For God to give us free will without losing God's sovereignty and abandoning. I think it's possible for God to watch us, allow us to let life unfold without being threatened by our choices, without being moved by our decisions. I don't look at God's sovereignty as this infringing control in our life. I think God's sovereignty is all about God knowing. And when you know, you don't need to manipulate, you don't need to force, you don't need to panic. You can allow. And so maybe God does not care in the human sense. Maybe God loves in a divine sense. And divine love is not emotional dependency. We see it in mothers. If we can see it, if we can observe a trait in a human, the highest humans can exhibit this special type of love. I think it's called agape or agape love in the Bible, where it's like this highest form of love. And I think divine love is far beneath that, far beyond that. It's infinite. And in that space, it lets you be, it lets you choose. It's the wisdom that lets us fall. It's the mercy that receives us when we return, that Jesus preached about, the prodigal son when he came back, the 99, the one that they left for the 99. It's the provision, that love, it provides, and it provides what was already there before we even knew we needed it. I don't think it's careless, but it's beyond caring. It's boundless. No fears, no lack, no panic, doesn't need possession, no insecurity. And I think maybe that's the kind of love that we haven't learned how to recognize, because it's beyond our comprehension as humans. And if we look at what Jesus said, it becomes clear that God's love is something that we may never understand until we experience it. And so, how can I serve a God that does not care? Because I believe that God is beyond caring. There may not be a word to describe that relationship, that trait, but caring is not enough. So in today, day 25, allow God to express the beauty, the infinite. Be that expression. Trust that God has provided something, has given you a platform to express. And we express that through serving, through being, through giving. So I hope this has impacted your day, and that you can take this thought and just think about it.